Welcome to the deep dive. We're here to get into the really impactful shifts happening in crypto. Sometimes the biggest changes, the real game changers, they aren't always the headline price surges or the latest meme coin frenzy. Often they're these technical steps forward happening kind of under the hood that quietly change what's even possible. They fundamentally alter the infrastructure, right? It makes you stop and think, how do you really see Bitcoin now? Is it still mainly that fortress, that digital gold, the ultimate store of value, maybe a hedge? Or are you starting to see it as something more, like a truly functional payment system, something robust enough for, global use, daily transactions? Is it finally stepping up?
Okay, so let's unpack this because
Mm.
honestly, we have some genuinely massive news today, news that could really reshape that whole perception. Tether, I mean, they're the biggest player by far in stablecoins, right? They're making a huge move. They're bringing USDT, their main stablecoin, natively to the coin. And this isn't just some small update. It feels like a really profound strategic decision.
So, our mission in this deep dive is to explore the tech that makes this possible. It's this protocol called RGB, and really get our heads around what this means, the implications for Bitcoin, for stablecoins generally, and, well, for the whole Web3 space you're involved in. Seriously, this isn't just a minor tweak. It could be a paradigm shift, potentially redefining Bitcoin's whole utility, its role in your digital finances, opening doors many thought were welded shut just a few years back.
Yeah, what's really fascinating here is the timing and just the sheer ambition of it all. I mean, for years, Bitcoin's reputation, rightly so, has been built on being the most secure, the most decentralized, the most censorship resistant asset out there. It's an incredible store of value, but using it for everyday transactions, especially for stable assets, that's been, well, limited. It's why stablecoins mostly ended up on other layer ones. Ethereum, Tron, Solana, Avalanche, those platforms became the go-to places for stablecoins. And Bitcoin, it mostly stuck to its digital gold story, which is a powerful story, don't get me wrong, but it meant if you wanted the stability of USDT, you often had to step away from Bitcoin's top-tier security. So this move by Tether, using RGB, it directly challenges that whole setup. It's about merging Bitcoin's rock-solid foundation with the kind of fluid usability stablecoins give you. Throughout this deep dive, we're not just going to cover what's happening technically. We really need to dig into why this matters for you, whether you're a user, a dev, an investor, or just someone keen on where decentralized finance is heading.
Absolutely. That exact intersection, security meeting utility, that's what makes this so incredibly compelling. Okay, let's start right at the core announcement. Tether is launching USDT natively on Bitcoin. And that word native, it's doing a lot of heavy lifting here, isn't it? It's more than just jargon. When we say native, we're not talking about like a wrapped token that's just representing USDT held somewhere else, maybe on a different chain or in a vault, or some kind of IOU on a sidechain. No, this means direct issuance, direct transactions happening within Bitcoin's own system using its core security. Crypto News called it Tether's milestone move, which feels about right. But for our listeners, why is that native part so crucial? What does it really mean, the good and maybe the tricky parts, for Bitcoin's own integrity and security long term?
That's a great question. And yet native is absolutely the key term here. When we talk about native issuance on Bitcoin, it means the whole stablecoin lifecycle, creating it, sending it around, eventually destroying it. It's all directly tracked and validated using Bitcoin's own transaction model. We're talking specifically about the UTXO model, unspent transaction output. That's fundamental to Bitcoin. This is completely different from wrapped tokens. Those are basically IOUs on another blockchain, just pointing to an asset held somewhere else, often by a central party. Big difference in trust needed there. Or think about signed chain tokens. They run on a separate network, maybe linked to Bitcoin somehow, but still with their own consensus rules, their own security profile. With native issuance using something like RGB, USDT gets to directly inherit Bitcoin's security guarantees. Every USDT transaction effectively becomes part of Bitcoin's verifiable history. It gets the same incredible decentralization, the same immutability, the same security that Bitcoin itself offers. So you're not depending on some external bridge being secure or trusting extra parties beyond just Bitcoin's own consensus.
And it preserves Bitcoin's integrity because, and this is vital, it doesn't actually change Bitcoin's core rules. It cleverly builds on top of them. It's efficient, non-intrusive. USDT becomes like an integral part of the network's verifiable data history, but without clogging up the main consensus layer with stuff that isn't pure Bitcoin. That's always a concern for Bitcoin theorists, right? The challenge maybe, well, getting wallets and exchanges and all the infrastructure to support these new native assets, that takes time and effort. But the security benefit, it's huge.
That makes sense. That security inheritance is profound. It avoids just bolting something on. But, someone might still ask, isn't adding anything, even on top, inherently risky for Bitcoin? Doesn't it compromise that beautiful simplicity? How do we reassure people that RGB, while building on Bitcoin, isn't messing with its core security principles, and if native is the what, then RGB is the how. CoinSpeaker mentioned Tether partnered with RGB, calling it a next-gen protocol. They said it allows for private, scalable asset issuance anchored to Bitcoin. The really elegant part seems to be doing this without bloating the base chain. That's always the big worry, right? Keeping Bitcoin lean and decentralized. Can you explain that technical elegance a bit more? Maybe an analogy for how it avoids just dumping loads of data onto Bitcoin?
Yeah, that's a totally fair question and a really important one for anyone who values Bitcoin. The reassurance comes from RGB's basic design. It's often called a zero-knowledge, client-side validated state machine. Quite a mouthful, I know. What it means is RGB isn't trying to cram complex smart contracts or huge amounts of data directly onto the Bitcoin blockchain itself. That would bloat it, complicate it. Instead, it uses Bitcoin primarily as this rock-solid, globally agreed-upon ordering system, a commitment layer. Think of it like this. Bitcoin's blockchain is like a super secure global notary ledger. It only records confirmations that something happened, not all the fiddly details. The RGB transaction itself, who owns the USDT, where it went, the amount that stuff is actually stored off-chain. But a tiny, secure cryptographic fingerprint, a commitment of that off-chain RGB transaction, gets embedded inside a normal Bitcoin transaction, usually using something like op return, or even better, a taproot outcome. This fingerprint is the proof. It's a time-stamped, tamper-proof marker on the Bitcoin chain saying, hey, an RGB state change happened right here, right now.
So while the full USDT transfer details aren't public on Bitcoin, the proof that it occurred and its exact place in the sequence of events is there. Secured by Bitcoin's massive proof of work, it's like that notary stamping your document. They confirm it exists, they date it, but they don't need to read or store the whole document's contents. This prevents bloat because most of the data, the asset details, lives client-side. It's only relevant to the people involved, not the whole Bitcoin network. It's very different from older ideas like colored coins that try to stuff too much data into Bitcoin TXS, or even some newer layer ones where every node has to process everything. RGB respects Bitcoin's minimalism while cleverly extending what it can do. Security is inherited, not compromised.
That notary analogy really clicks. Bitcoin confirming the event without needing all the details. Brilliant. Okay, so that's the backbone, the native issuance tech. Now, let's connect that to the actual user experience, especially for payments, because this isn't just about Bitcoin's base layer, is it? The integration also means USDT payments over the Lightning Network. Decrypt really emphasized this. Instant, low-cost, private USDT payments. This feels like it really pushes Bitcoin beyond just digital gold. Makes it a proper, functional payment platform for stable assets, too. So Lightning's already built for speed and low cost, right? How does this existing setup enhance what RGB can do for stablecoin transfers? It feels like a perfect match, almost symbiotic.
Oh, absolutely. Synergy is incredibly potent. Game-changing, really. The Lightning Network, being layer 2, was always conceived to tackle Bitcoin's base layer slowness and cost for small, fast payments. It does this with payment channels between users. These allow for basically unlimited, near-instant, super cheap transactions off the main blockchain. Think of these channels as pre-agreed contracts, letting people shuffle Bitcoin back and forth without needing every single shuffle confirmed by the whole slow Bitcoin network. Now, slot RGB into that. RGB gives you the framework to issue and manage assets like USDT natively, anchored to Bitcoin security. Combine RGB with Lightning, now you're not just zipping Bitcoin around in those channels, you're zipping RGB-powered USDT. Just picture that. Your USDT exists natively on Bitcoin thanks to RGB, inheriting all that security. Then it travels through Lightning's super fast private express lanes. You get the best of everything. Bitcoin's unmatched base layer security via RGB's anchor, plus Lightning's instant settlement. We're talking milliseconds, incredibly low fees, and better privacy because channel transactions aren't broadcast globally.
It's like having the world's most secure bank vault for your money, but also having a private high-speed nomadic tube system built right into it for instant, cheap, confidential transfers of specific assets within that vault system. It completely changes Bitcoin's potential as a payment network.
That's a really clear image. Okay, let's dig just a bit deeper into RGB's tech to really appreciate it. You said it's anchored to Bitcoin, leveraging the main chain security without overloading it. Can you explain the specific crypto magic there? How does RGB make sure it gets Bitcoin security without dumping extra data or complexity onto layer 1? That feels key to its long-term success.
Exactly. That anchoring is the heart of RGB's security and its lightweight design. Like I mentioned, the core idea is this cryptographic commitment. When you do an RGB transaction, say, Alice sends 100 USDT to Bob, the full details, who sent it, who got it, how much, the asset ID, all that, are not broadcast everywhere. Instead, just a small, cryptographically secure summary, like a hash or a commitment of that RGB transaction data, gets tucked into a regular Bitcoin transaction. This commitment usually goes into a special data carrier, part of the Bitcoin transaction, like an op return output, or more recently, efficiently, within a taproot output. We can get to that. This commitment is the verifiable proof. It's a tiny, unchangeable marker on the Bitcoin blockchain, setting an immutable timestamp and order for that RGB state change. So Bitcoin full nodes, they don't need to understand or parse the RGB stuff inside. They just validate the Bitcoin transaction containing the commitment like any other. This means the integrity, the order, the finality of all these RGB asset transfers are tied directly to Bitcoin's main chain consensus, secured by all that proof of work hashing power.
If someone tried to cheat off-chain with an RGB transaction, the commitment on Bitcoin wouldn't match up. Invalid. Simple as that. And it stops the chain getting overloaded because, again, the vast majority of the data, the actual asset transfer specifics, stays client-side or off-chain. Only the parties involved, maybe auditors, need it, not the whole world. It's minimalist but incredibly strong. Extends Bitcoin without breaking it.
That's super clear now how it borrows the security without being a burden. Okay, following on from that, you also mentioned privacy with RGB. How exactly does it achieve that privacy for asset stuff compared to, say, Ethereum, where everything's out in the open? What does that mean for user data, transaction visibility in the real world? And then scalability. How does RGB really deliver scalable asset issuance while sticking to Bitcoin's core ideas? This seems like a massive step up from earlier attempts to put assets on Bitcoin.
Right, let's tackle privacy first. On most public chains, Ethereum, Tron, you name it, every transaction, sender, receiver, amount, it's all broadcast globally and etched onto a public ledger forever. Sure, addresses are pseudonyms, but with enough analysis, they can often be linked back to real people or companies, revealing your entire financial life. That's a huge privacy issue for many. RGB flips this using client-side validation and something called single-use seals. Instead of yelling transaction details to the whole network, RGB transactions are validated by the participants themselves. So when Alice sends USDT to Bob using RGB, she gives Bob the cryptographic proof and the asset's history, showing she owns it and can send it. Bob checks this proof using the RGB rules. The Bitcoin network. It only sees that tiny cryptographic commitment we talked about, not the juicy details. This means sensitive info, who sent what to whom. The exact amount stays confidential between Alice and Bob. It's a massive shift from the broadcast everything model. It gives you a level of financial confidentiality closer to traditional banking, but often lost on public blockchains.
Huge implications for user data protection, preventing surveillance, keeping your finances private. Now, scalability. RGB gets there through two main ways, both very Bitcoin-y. First, that client-side validation itself is a huge scalability booster. Instead of every single node on Earth needing to process and store every single USDT transfer, the validation work is pushed to the edges to the people actually doing the transaction. That removes a massive bottleneck right away. Second, RGB cleverly uses Bitcoin's UTXO model to represent assets. Each bit of USDT on RGB is tied cryptographically to a specific Bitcoin UTXO. When you spend USDT, you're essentially using up an RGB-enabled UTXO and creating a new one for the receiver. It works a bit like physical cash you hand over a specific node. It's not like updating a global account balance somewhere. This UTXO approach is naturally very efficient and can be parallelized easily. By building on Bitcoin's UTXO model and adding client-side validation, RGB allows for almost unlimited throughput for assets without needing centralization or demanding more from Bitcoin's base layer nodes. This is why it's so different from earlier attempts.
They often failed because they tried to force account-based ideas or too much data onto Bitcoin's minimalist UTXO design. RGB respects and extends Bitcoin's core strengths for potentially massive scale. It's really quite elegant.
Wow, okay, that detailed breakdown of the privacy and scalability tech is fantastic. It really shows how these complex ideas deliver real benefits without breaking Bitcoin's philosophy. All right, let's switch gears from the how to the so what. For you, the user, this is where the rubber meets the road, right? What does all this mean for your day-to-day crypto life? For the first time, really, you can manage your BTC and your USDT in the same wallet. CoinLaw.io pointed this out, saying it enables seamless stablecoin usage on the most secure blockchain. Think about the hassle before juggling different apps, different keys for different networks, maybe using risky bridges. That friction point, which was huge for so many people, could just disappear. What's the vibe among early testers and devs seeing this simplification happen?
That's absolutely the immediate, touchable benefit people are excited about. And if we connect that to the bigger picture, well, it fundamentally changes Bitcoin's role. It moves it beyond just being the digital safe, the store of value, into something much more dynamic. A versatile, integrated payment platform. Historically, like Investopedia noted, USDT lived mainly on Ethereum, Solana, Tron, Avalanche, etc.
That created this fragmented experience. If you wanted USDT, you usually had to leave the Bitcoin ecosystem or rely on centralized exchanges or maybe use wrapped versions with their own risks. This native move by Tether plugs a massive hole. It brings the dominant stablecoin right onto Bitcoin, but in a properly decentralized way. Now, from Tether's viewpoint, strategically, why do this? Why integrate deeply with Bitcoin when they're already on so many other big chains? It's because Bitcoin is still the king of decentralized security, censorship resistance, and network effect. By going native on Bitcoin, Tether isn't just adding another chain to their list. They're tapping into Bitcoin's unmatched trust factor.
They're potentially unlocking whole new markets. Think institutions, think Bitcoin maximalists, think traditional finance players who trust Bitcoin's security model above all else. This move enhances the legitimacy of stablecoins in a way that resonates with those groups. It extends Tether's reach to a user base that was historically underserved on its preferred network. It positions USDT as truly foundational across the entire crypto landscape. It's a powerful statement. The future of finance needs Bitcoin security, and stablecoins are a key part of that future.
That really clarifies the strategic angle, and this isn't happening in isolation, is it? It's part of Bitcoin evolving. Forbes reported that Tether worked with Lightning Labs, using the Taproot Assets protocol specifically to get USDT onto Lightning. That's super significant because Taproot itself was that major Bitcoin upgrade back in late 2021 where it boosted privacy, flexibility, efficiency. So aligning with Bitcoin's upgrades and privacy goals like this, it feels mature, thoughtful, not just some quick hack. It shows they're building with Bitcoin's architecture, respecting its path. But are there any potential downsides or trade-offs with this multi-layered approach, RGB, Taproot Assets, Lightning, that we should maybe keep in mind, even with all these benefits?
That's a really smart question to ask. No complex system comes without trade-offs or things to watch. So this is an important point. How do Taproot Assets, RGB, and Lightning work together? And what are the potential bumps in the road with this layered cake? Okay, Taproot, as you said, massive Bitcoin upgrade, introduced Schnorr signatures, smaller, more efficient, better for privacy, especially for complex transactions, and mathematicalized abstract syntax trees, letting you do more complex stuff without revealing everything on-chain. More privacy, more efficiency. Now, Taproot Assets, built by Lightning Labs on Taproot, uses these features. It's designed to issue and move assets on Bitcoin, specifically with the idea of then routing them over Lightning. It cleverly embeds asset data inside Taproot outputs, making them look like normal Bitcoin transactions from the outside. Big privacy win. RGB, as we've covered, provides the core framework, client-side validation, state management, all anchored to Bitcoin security. So the synergy looks like this, layer by layer. 1. RGB defines how the asset state, who owns what, is managed and checked, anchored to Bitcoin. 2. Taproot Assets
Provides the efficient, private way to encode and committance to RGB state onto the Bitcoin chain, optimized for stuff moving to Lightning. It's like the specialized packaging. 3. Lightning Network then provides the super fast, super cheap private highway for those Taproot Assets package RGB managed stablecoins. The security boost is massive. You're leveraging Bitcoin's core security via RGB and Taproot, giving USDT transactions a level of decentralization and finality that's arguably way beyond other chains where USDT lives. Each layer strengthens the others. But the potential challenges or trade-offs. Developer complexity. Let's be honest, building wallets and apps that juggle all three layers smoothly, RGB, Taproot Assets, Lightning, that's tough. It's intricate work, which might slow down how quickly we see lots of easy-to-use tools. User learning curve. While the aim is simplicity for the user, the complexity underneath might still pop up in weird ways. Like understanding Lightning channel liquidity might be a new thing for stablecoin users. Liquidity bootstrapping. Getting enough USDT flowing in Lightning channels initially is key. If there isn't enough liquidity locked up, transfers could be slow or fail.
People need to actively open and manage these channels, which takes time to build up network-wide. Implementation bugs. The protocols might be solid, but the software implementing them can always have bugs, especially where these layers connect. Constant auditing and testing are crucial. Scripting limits. While it's moving towards programmable money, Bitcoin scripting is still deliberately simpler than, say, Ethereum. Really complex DeFi might still be tricky, though simpler things are now definitely possible. These aren't deal breakers, more like growing pains for a sophisticated new system. But the fundamental security game, that's the main event here. It really shows how much innovation is still happening on Bitcoin, moving it beyond just simple value transfer.
That detailed look at the interplay and the potential hurdles gives a much clearer picture than just the headlines. Okay, let's zoom out again to the big picture impact. This development, as AI Invest highlighted, potentially elevates Bitcoin into a full-fledged programmable money network. Now, that's a huge statement. It's not just about sending stablecoins anymore. It's a conceptual leap for Bitcoin, pushing it way past its original peer-to-peer electronic cash idea, or just being digital gold. What does that phrase programmable money network really signify for Bitcoin's future? What new kinds of functions does this unlock that were just pipe dreams before on Bitcoin?
Yeah, that leap towards programmability is what's truly fascinating. It's like Bitcoin is evolving, expanding on its original vision, but using these smart layer techniques. Bitcoin's own scripting language was always kept deliberately simple, right? To maximize security, avoid the complexity that plagued other chains. But now, with RGB and Taproot assets securely anchored, we're seeing functionalities emerge that used to belong only to those complex smart contract platforms. Let's talk concrete use cases this enables, things that could be game changers. First, remittances and cross-border payments. This is probably the most immediate, most impactful one. Think about it now. Someone working abroad, sending money home, it often means high fees, maybe 5%, 10%, multi-day waits, having to go to a physical office. Now, imagine using USDT over Lightning via RGB. You initiate the transfer from your wallet, maybe converting local currency to USDT. Your family receives it seconds later, maybe costing fractions of a cent, right on their phone. They can instantly use it, swap it locally, whatever. This isn't just slightly better.
It's revolutionary for financial access, especially for billions in developing countries relying on these payments. The impact on inclusion, cutting out those parasitic fees, is massive. Second, DeFi primitives on Bitcoin. For ages, DeFi meant Ethereum or similar chains. Doing real DeFi on Bitcoin itself seemed impossible due to its simple scripting. But now, with native stablecoins like USDT and asset issuance via RGB right on Bitcoin, we can see in new ways. Bitcoin DeFi, what could you do? Maybe use USDT as collateral for decentralized loans, or do trustless atomic swaps, basic decentralized exchanges even, all built on Bitcoin security. No external chains, no wrapped tokens needed. Imagine getting a loan against your BTC, but receiving and paying back in USDT, all within a non-custodial Bitcoin setup. That brings Bitcoin security to DeFi, attracting users wary of other platforms' risks. Third, maybe longer term, resilient offline transfers. This is more speculative, but RGB's client-side nature opens doors for finance in tough situations. Think places with bad internet, censorship, disaster zones.
Assets could potentially be transferred between devices offline, maybe via QR codes, short-range radio with strong crypto trust, then settled on-chain later when connected. It shows the power of this architecture for truly sovereign money. All these possibilities feed into the Web3 implications. They vastly widen the range of decentralized apps and services that can leverage Bitcoin's unparalleled security and network effect. Bitcoin isn't just the settlement layer for BTC anymore. It's becoming a foundation for a whole new generation of financial tools, built smartly in layers.
That paints a really powerful picture of Bitcoin's future role evolving from static gold to a dynamic platform. And let's not forget Tether's sheer size here. This isn't some tiny experiment. CoinDesk reported Tether has over $140 billion in USDT issued, handling something like $10 trillion in annual volume. They are an absolute giant. So this isn't a niche player testing the waters. It's the market leader going all in with the full-scale integration via RGB and Lightning. That colossal scale plugged directly into Bitcoin, it substantially strengthens Bitcoin's everyday utility. This isn't just adding a feature, it's potentially rerouting massive financial flows onto Bitcoin's infrastructure. What sort of metrics should we be watching to see if this huge move is actually working? And could this force other stablecoin issuers to jump on the Bitcoin bandwagon too?
You hit the nail on the head, emphasizing Tether scale. That's what makes this a potential market earthquake, not just a tech demo. With that kind of weight behind it, we need to track specific things to see the real impact. For adoption flow, we'll be looking at USDT on RGB. How much USDT is Tether actually issuing natively on Bitcoin? Is it growing steadily? That shows real commitment. Broader RGB use. Are other assets beyond USDT starting to use RGB? Are wallets and services building support? That validates the protocol itself. Lightning stablecoin use, this is crucial. Is Lightning usage for non-BTC assets, specifically USDT, taking off? More transactions, higher volume. That signals a major shift for layer 2. Then for use case growth, we need real-world evidence. Remittance numbers. Can we track increases in cross-border payments using USDT on Lightning, especially in high-fee corridors? New wallets merchants. Are we seeing new user-friendly wallets and business tools emerge that specifically support RGB Lightning stablecoins? Are people actually using them? Lightning channel activity. How many channels are open carrying USDT? What's the value flowing through them?
Are we seeing activity spikes from remittance-heavy regions? That proves it's solving real problems. And for performance metrics, we compare Bitcoin footprint. How small are those RGB commitments on the main chain? Less data is better. Speed. How fast are RGB transactions anchored? And how instant are the Lightning transfers? Privacy. Can analysts track these transactions as easily as on public chains? We'd look for signs they can't. Now, speculation time. Will others follow Tether? Almost certainly, if this works. Tether leads the market. If they prove you can have secure, cheap, fast stablecoins on Bitcoin via RGB Lightning, the pressure on Circle, USDC, and others will be immense. Why stay only on chains with arguably lower security or higher fees if the best option is now on Bitcoin? It could totally reshape the competitive landscape for layer ones. They might lose huge stablecoin liquidity if they don't adapt. Bitcoin's layer 2 killer app, it might just be stablecoins forcing a major realignment everywhere.
That's a really solid framework for watching this unfold. The potential ripple effects are definitely huge. Okay, let's bring it right back down to the practical level for someone listening. Think about the difference in transaction speed and cost pre and post RGB integration for moving stablecoins around within the Bitcoin world. Before RGB, what were the options? They weren't great, were they? What were their main drawbacks that made this RGB approach so needed? And how does this new way compare to just sending USDT on Ethereum or Tron today, which is where most of it happens now?
Yeah, that comparison really drives home why RGB is such a big deal. Before RGB, if you wanted stablecoin access somehow connected to Bitcoin, your choices were, well, limited and usually pretty clunky. You can maybe keep your stablecoins and BTC on a centralized exchange, but then you have massive counterparty risk, right? Not your keys, not your coins. And it's not really on Bitcoin anyway. Or you had various wrapped stablecoins on Bitcoin sidechains or maybe some early layer 2s. But these almost always meant trusting extra parties, using different software, dealing with fragmented liquidity and often slow, expensive bridging processes. It wasn't smooth, efficient, or truly trustless like Bitcoin users expect. Basically, there was no good way to use stablecoins that was genuinely decentralized, scalable, private, and directly secured by Bitcoin's main chain. Now compare that to sending USDT on Ethereum or Tron now. Ethereum, sure, lots of DeFi, but gas fees can be insane during busy times. Dollars, tens of dollars, even more for one transfer. And confirmation times, minutes, sometimes longer. Tron, much cheaper, usually just cents, and super fast, seconds often.
But Tron doesn't have Bitcoin's level of decentralized security or global trust. Its consensus is more centralized. With RGB on Lightning, it's a whole different ballgame. You get Bitcoin's top-tier security anchoring the asset via RGB, but the actual transactions fly in Lightning. That means USDT fees over Lightning should be incredibly low, tiny fractions of a cent. Makes micropayments feasible, which is impossible on Ethereum with stablecoins. And speed, near instant, milliseconds or seconds. Like using a messaging app or tapping a card, but with crypto security and privacy built in. The difference is night and day. We went from slow, costly, often insecure ways to get stablecoins near Bitcoin to instant, practically free, private, and natively secure transactions on the world's strongest blockchain. It's a massive leap in usability.
That really highlights the practical upgrade. Okay, we mentioned privacy and scalability a few times. Let's just dig into what those really mean for an average person listening. For someone doing regular transactions, maybe a freelancer getting paid or a small shop taking crypto or sending money home, what does enhanced privacy actually feel like in a world where usually everything on-chain is public? And why is scalability so vital for actual adoption for those use cases like remittances? Why isn't it just, a technical term for engineers?
For the average user, that enhanced privacy from RGB's client-side approach is fundamental. It changes what the world sees about your finances. On most public chains now, your whole history, who paid you, how much you hold, it's all visible to anyone. That creates this permanent digital footprint that can be analyzed, tracked, potentially used against you. Think about everyday stuff, paying rent, buying things, getting your salary, business deals. Do you really want all that broadcast publicly? It's uncomfortable, and it's a security risk. Financial surveillance, targeted scams, social engineering. With RGB, the details of your USDT transfer, sender, receiver, amount stay private between you and the other party. Your spending habits, your income, your business network aren't public knowledge. It brings back a level of financial confidentiality, like your private bank statement that got lost in the transparency of many blockchains. It protects your financial life, enhances security, keeps your sovereignty, and scalability. It's not just jargon. It's the absolute key to making crypto useful for everyone, everywhere, for real-world things like remittances or just daily buying and selling. If a network can only handle, say, a few thousand transactions per second globally, it just can't support billions of people doing daily finance. Imagine trying to send $50 home, but it takes ages and costs dollars in fees because the network's jammed. It's just not practical or accessible, especially for the people who need cheap, fast payments the most. Scalability, which RGB plus Lightning delivers, means transactions can be instant and cheap, even when millions of people are using it. It lets the network handle global demand. It transforms Bitcoin from a cool niche tech into a viable, everyday financial tool for the entire planet. Without that scale, the dream of global, decentralized finance just stays a dream.
That really drives home why these aren't just technical details, but core requirements for success. Okay, let's try and wrap this up. What does this all mean? We've done a pretty deep dive today into Tether bringing USDT natively onto Bitcoin using this RGB protocol. It's a huge move, seriously broadening Bitcoin's utility way beyond just being digital gold. We got into the details of how RGB allows for private, scalable stablecoin transactions, especially when you layer it with the Lightning Network. This lets you manage your BTC and USDT together seamlessly in one wallet, cutting friction and boosting privacy. And the implications are massive. It's turning Bitcoin into a more versatile, programmable money network. It can now potentially support things like global remittances, new DeFi applications, and way more, all while using Bitcoin's unmatched security.
It really does leave us with a big question to think about, doesn't it? Given all this, the native integration, the clever client-side tech, the power combo of RGB, Taproot assets, and Lightning, plus Tether's massive influence, could this integration fundamentally shake up the whole blockchain world? Will it pull stablecoin activity away from other layer ones and onto Bitcoin? Could Bitcoin actually become this global payments rail overnight? Or is it more likely to be a slower burn, a powerful but perhaps still niche innovation for a while as the ecosystem builds out? That's the really interesting question to ponder moving forward.
Absolutely. And if this deep dive helped clarify how Tether's RGB move is transforming Bitcoin, shifting it from just a gold-like asset towards being a genuine stablecoin settlement powerhouse, then we'd really appreciate your support. Please consider liking this deep dive, subscribing to our channel, and hitting that notification bell. Seriously, your engagement makes a huge difference. It helps us get seen in the algorithm, reach more people like you who are curious about this space, and it genuinely allows us to keep bringing you these kinds of in-depth crypto insights. We really appreciate you joining us for this exploration into what feels like a very exciting new chapter for Bitcoin.